Good evening, everybody who's watching. Tonight is the full moon night, and it's the Uposatha. So later on, the monks will chant the Patimokkha, the 227 monastic rules. Outside is cold. There's snow on the hills. The world is silent, around here anyway, because everybody is in lockdown. So a good occasion to meditate, chant and listen to the Dhamma. So tonight is Tuesday night also, so it's our question and answer session. So I believe we have some questions tonight.
The first question is, Dear Luang Pa, does time spent in meditation and focusing on the breath detract from or enhance problem-solving abilities? Thank you.
Well, the simple answer is if you're meditating correctly, developing mindfulness and wisdom, then it should enhance your problem-solving abilities rather than detract from them. But one thing to remember is that there's the meditation we do that you can see from the outside. So you might look at someone and see them sitting with their eyes closed for a period of time in a meditation posture, and you say they're meditating. But what's going on in their mind can vary. So some people could be sitting there just endlessly proliferating about all kinds of things and not very mindful, not very aware. Some people could be sleepy, daydreaming. So the important thing is that meditation, or what we call bhavana, is the cultivation of skillful qualities of mind rooted in mindfulness and clear comprehension, or what we sometimes just say is awareness, and then also the development of wisdom and understanding through contemplation. So if one is cultivating the correct qualities, the mind becomes clearer, sharper, more peaceful, and in the best possible position to understand things. Because as you become more mindful, even though you may have all kinds of thoughts, memories, feelings arising in your experience, the mindfulness gives you some solid foundation of awareness, and when it's more continuous, that becomes stillness of mind, where you can see things better. See your own body, your thoughts, your feelings, your memories in a more clear way, and understand them in a deeper way than the more usual experience where we're just thinking and thinking and thinking. And some of our thoughts in the normal way may be quite useful, but many of them are distracting, even harmful to us, and bring us states of stress, confusion, and so on. But when we have mindfulness, the opportunity is there to really train our thoughts. We can direct our mind to ponder, to contemplate something from a place of quiet. So our reflections tend to be more valuable, more productive, creative, and bring with them this sense of peace that comes from understanding as well. So if you have been meditating, for example, on the breath, maybe during your meditation you're not thinking about any problem you have in your day, in your life, your work, your family, and so on, but you're developing the mindfulness and maybe contemplating what we call vipassana, contemplating the impermanent, transient nature of thoughts and feelings, and developing some insight into that. But say when you finish that meditation and your mind is clearer, brighter, more peaceful than normal, there's some stillness, some heightened awareness from that meditation. Maybe after you finish that meditation you might turn to contemplate or try and understand something that is bothering you, a problem. And it could be something quite ordinary to do with your work or your health or your family, or how to deal with some new situation that's arisen. And because your mind is now more clear, your mind is more charged. You can direct it to consider that issue, that problem, and you might be able to look at it in a more unbiased way, so you're not just reacting with your emotions to whatever the problem is. You're not getting caught up in your feelings of frustration or anger or worry, but you are in a better position to actually look and contemplate whatever the problem is in a more unbiased, more objective way, and maybe get a good result from that. So people who meditate, often they're doing other activities in their life, and they can bring some of these skills they learn in meditation to bear on their work or on their family issues or their health issues, because they're training their mind to be able to look and consider things in a more peaceful and unbiased way. Because we know when we're not so mindful, say when we don't meditate and we don't have much awareness of the inner workings of our mind, then it's very easy just to act out of compulsion. Whatever emotion comes up can be a driving force for our decision making, our thoughts, our actions. And quite often we can make a problem worse by just worrying about it, endlessly thinking about it, but not coming to no real understanding or solution. And maybe even that problem can become a bigger problem, and it comes out in our speech, our behavior, and we pass it on to the people around us. We've got a problem, and then we make that problem something everyone else takes part in as well. That's when we're not so mindful and our mind is not so well trained and well developed. But the well-trained mind, they used to say about Ajahn Chah, our teacher, one of the things that he was really good at when he was teaching people and helping them to understand the truths of life better, he'd say he could make a big problem. Somebody comes to him with a problem, he could make their big problem into a small problem. Or somebody comes to him with a sort of more modest, smaller problem, he could make that problem disappear. But just giving them some mindfulness, some wisdom, helping them to look at it in a different way, or from a way of kind of unjudgmental, unbiased awareness. And many people really are grateful to him for that, because he really helped them to understand how to contemplate things and reduce problems in life and even get rid of them. He himself, he said he understood when he was a young monk some of the benefits of training the mind in meditation, because even as monks we have problems, you might say, challenges, problems. So one thing he had was, when he was a young monk, he had to learn to sew, like we all do. We learn to make our own robes, to cut, sew, dye robes. And myself and many other monks come into the robes. We have no previous skills with sewing, don't know how to use a sewing machine, measure cloth, sew cloth, join cloth. We don't know that. We're not trained tailors or seamstresses. So Ajahn Chah had that same problem, and he had cloth available, but he had to sew the outer robe. So this is one. This robe we put on our shoulder for ceremonies and chanting, but it's an outer robe, 2 layers, and when we go out on alms round, we wear it as a second layer, or we can use it as a blanket, or even as a very thin mattress when we're sleeping. So this robe, because it's 2 layers, is quite complex to sew. There's a certain pattern that, for myself and many other monks I know, when they first attempt to sew it, it's quite challenging, and you usually need a teacher, a mentor, someone who's done it before to show you how to do it, because it's quite hard. But Ajahn Chah didn't have anyone to show him. So he said he learned how to sew this robe in his meditation. He had a basic understanding of sewing robes, but for this 2-layered kind of outer robe, he worked out how to do it in his mind, just by visualizing it, following the stitching, the pattern, how to turn corners, how to join 2 layers of cloth together to make it almost like a bag, that kind of thing. Anyone who's sewn will understand this. He did it all in his mind, worked it out, and then put it into practice, actually sewed his robe without a teacher. And when he was telling the other monks later in life how he did that, he wasn't showing off to say, oh, I know how to do things. He was just saying, you can use your mind in this way. And so his student, Luang Por Liam, who is now the teacher at Ajahn Chah's monastery, anyone who knows him will know that he, over the years, has become a skilled builder and manager of building projects. But he's also developed engineering and architectural skills. But none of this has really been learned in an academic way on paper. It's all stored in his head through experience, and he's learned how to do things by watching others, watching the professional builders, learning, experimenting, and maybe getting it wrong sometimes. But he's learned over the years to become a very skilled builder, and he's done many, many projects and helped others do many projects. Obviously, as an act of service, he doesn't do it as an occupation, a job, a paid job. It's just as a service for the community. And one time, one of the Western monks came to him and said, Luang Por, you're building this huge meditation hall. It was at Ajahn Chah's monastery. He said, well, this is quite a complex project. Where are all the plans? And he just pointed to his head. They're in his head. And anyone who's lived with him and worked with him knows he's got it all in his head. He knows what's to be done, knows the specifications, the sizes, the process, the way to do things. But it's all come through his head. And in his head, and it's stored there. He's got the skills, the information, the picture, the image. So it's like a kind of internal computer. And he can work with engineers and architects, he does, but from his point of view, he's always working in his head. So it's just another example of how you can train yourself in many, many things, using the skills you learn from meditation and then applying them to problems, challenges, things that you have to learn in daily life. So generally, I would say yes, meditation does help you to solve problems. But there's a time and place for problem solving, so it doesn't mean to say you just sit down, solve your problem in your meditation. Maybe you forget about your problem first, train your mind in mindfulness first, then go back later to consider the problem, and you probably get a better outcome.
The next question is, now that the world has changed, how do we deal with this sense of anxiety and foreboding about the future?
Well, in one sense, I guess the Buddha encouraged us to have a certain caution and be careful about the future because it's uncertain. Nobody knows what the future will bring. In Buddhism, we call this heedfulness, apamada, and not to just take things for granted or assume everything will go according to your wishes and your plans or how you think things will turn out. Sometimes we have to review our life and say, there were many things that happened that I didn't plan for. They happened and were unexpected. Some things do go more or less how we expect them to be, but you never know exactly. So a heedful person is always aware of the uncertainties of life. Whatever you're looking at, whether you're talking about your personal health, your relationships, your family, job security, getting a promotion or going to lose your job, the economy, and as you go further away from yourself, there's less and less that you can really predict with clear accuracy because there's so many factors involved, say in the economy or how the government and the society will respond to COVID-19 and how it will change things. We can't be absolutely sure where we'll be in a few years from now. But if you have the right attitude, that uncertainty can be a help to you because it makes you heedful, makes you careful. You don't take things for granted. You're aware that some things won't work out the way you want. Some things may turn out better than you planned. Some things maybe not as good as you planned. But considering the uncertainties of life can make us wiser, more aware, more careful. Because the opposite is, well, you just get caught into fixed views about things. So it may be a view based on anxiety and fear, and you're just constantly fearing and worrying about what may happen. It may happen, you don't really know, but the worry is already going to bring you down, make your mind very unhappy, and that will maybe affect how you decide to do things, how you act in the world. If you ask any doctor, say somebody is diagnosed with possible cancer, for example, and we all, most people fear the word cancer, and they think, oh no, it's the end if they got it. But say they get diagnosed with possible cancer, but they've got to wait for the test results. They don't really know what they've got or how bad it is. The doctor says the worst problem is not the test, the diagnosis, and the person may not even have any physical pain yet, but it's the worry. The doctors joke, they say the worry will kill them before the cancer does. And that's how important our mind is. If we do fall into anxiety, it hurts us mentally, and it causes us problems, makes our thinking biased again, and we get confused, stressed, worn out. So we have to accept there are some things in the life, particularly in the future, we just don't know yet, and we have to accept that. Bring your mind back to the present moment, establish mindfulness. And if you focus more on the present moment, making that right, bringing up the mindfulness, training your mind to be more aware, to understand what you can understand in the present moment from your life, then you're putting yourself in the best position to face whatever may come next. And nobody can answer some of these questions. Where will the world be next year? Will we be able to travel out of Australia? Will we be able to meet our friends, go to work? Will I have a job? Will there be enough food? Today someone was telling me there's going to be problems with food production. So there are certainly things we have to be concerned about, and we should make certain plans and be prepared for things, of course. But on the other hand, we can't let the mind just fall into anxiety, because then we don't make very good plans. We become paranoid, afraid. It eats us up inside, and it doesn't help. So mindfulness, establishing mindfulness and a healthy awareness of the impermanence of life and the uncertainty can really help how to face up with things. And you have to trust in the good that you've done and determine your mind to keep doing more good, and trust in the good karma that you're making. That will bring good results, because it's a fact of life. It's a law. You do good, brings good results. So keep doing good. Whatever the situation is, we don't know. We have this saying in the monastery based on the Winnie the Pooh books, like today, the last day it's been a bit windy and stormy. This afternoon a tree fell down in the forest. So when it's like that, you're walking around in the forest, you can't be sure what's coming next because there's a wind, a storm. Maybe a tree will fall down or a branch will fall down. So it'd be easy to become very worried and afraid like that. But in Winnie the Pooh, they had this problem too. Winnie the Pooh in the forest on a blustery day, the wind is blowing, and he's walking along with his friend Piglet. And Piglet is a little pig, always a little bit anxious, afraid. Winnie the Pooh is more solid, walking along, and Piglet grabs Winnie the Pooh's paw and says, Winnie the Pooh, what will we do if a tree falls on our head? And Winnie the Pooh stops and thinks, what will we do if a tree doesn't fall on our head? It's an equally possible outcome, isn't it? Maybe the world will fall apart next year, or maybe it won't. I always remember that year, I can't remember, was it 2012? They said the world was going to end, And people were coming to the monastery all the time saying, is the world really going to end? I said, I don't know. What date do they give you? And they had a date, I think it was like the 24th of December or 23rd of December or something. I said, well, I don't know, let's see. We've only got two outcomes, two possibilities. It's either going to end or it won't end. Monks don't bet. I said, if I was a betting man, I'll put it on, it's not going to end, but let's see. And it didn't end. And everyone forgot about that prediction. So, don't rush to predict the worst or believe those predictions yet. Things can improve because human beings are very resourceful. They have many good qualities, and people have been making good karma. Not everyone, but many people make good karma, and you maybe can trust in that for the future.
The next question is, Dear Lungpa, could you explain the three types of suffering, dukkha dukkha, viparinama dukkha, and sankhara dukkha? How do we practice to overcome sankhara dukkha and viparinama dukkha?
Oh. Well, the only way to get beyond these kinds of suffering is nibbana. You have to practice, cultivate the Eightfold Noble Path that we're always talking about. And when it's complete, you reach the end of suffering, nibbana. The Buddha was a very excellent teacher. We call him the excellent teacher. And he, in his great wisdom, would explain things very thoroughly from many angles. So this word dukkha, which is often translated as suffering, pain, stress, or as a characteristic, we often translate it as the unsatisfactoriness of an experience or a physical thing or a mental thing. It's unsatisfactory. Why is it unsatisfactory? Well, things change. And if things are what we call conditioned things, formations, which is the word sankhara, it's subject to change. The conditions change, that thing will change. So things arise, change, pass away. They're subject to decline because of change. Things decline. They don't stay in a fixed, unchanging state. They decline. That's dukkha in the way the Buddha described. You might call it viparinama dukkha, is the dukkha, the suffering of change. And dukkha dukkha is the pretty obvious daily pain and suffering, physical pain, mental pain that we experience and which we're often dealing with and looking to address, say, through meditation and wise reflection and making good karma. Often is to face and deal with different kinds of painful experiences. But viparinama dukkha is like the dukkha of change, which is just inherent in all phenomena in this world. They are constantly moving around, changing, and subject to decline. So, it's like some of that, what we might call hidden dukkha, hidden stress and suffering and hidden unsatisfactoriness. So even when you get what you want and you're happy, it doesn't last because things change. So you have a pleasant or happy experience, good, but then it changes on you. So it's stressful and it's unsatisfactory. It can't give you lasting happiness. Sankhara dukkha is the dukkha of formations, and particularly, looking from the big picture at existence. Existing as a human being is unsatisfactory because it has birth and death. We don't last forever, so it's unsatisfactory. So many people aspire to, heavenly rebirth, but heavenly rebirth, birth as a being in a Deva realm or Brahma realm, it's still sankhara dukkha, subject to birth and death, birth, aging, death. It may be a very pleasant existence if we're reborn in heaven, but it doesn't last forever. So the nature of any existence, a lower realm, a higher realm, a human realm, animal realm, whatever we think about it, the one thing we can be sure of, the one thing that doesn't change, is the fact that it is subject to change. Birth and death doesn't last. So it's dukkha, it's unsatisfactory. The things of this world, the material things, the experiences we can have in this world are subject to change, they don't last, they're viparinama dukkha, they're unsatisfactory. And then there's the more regular, close to hand kind of dukkha, dukkha, pain, physical pain, mental pain of unpleasant experiences we encounter. Someone is rude to you, or you lose your job, or you have some health problem, it brings you maybe physical pain or mental pain. That's dukkha. There's three kinds of dukkha, but they all have the same quality of the unsatisfactoriness of life, of existence, of phenomena. And the way to deal with it is to develop mindfulness, wisely reflect, become aware of these characteristics so your mind is no longer caught out by them or deluded by them. So that doesn't mean to say the Buddha said you can't enjoy anything in life or have any pleasures. You can, and you will. But don't get deluded by them because they're unsatisfactory in their nature. There's the immediate suffering of you get your pleasure and then you're worried you'll lose it. And then there's change, maybe over time, and eventually it does decline and disappear, and then you have lost it. It's gone. More dukkha. So they're unsatisfactory in that sense. So even the happiness we gain from our practice, as we're going along developing this path, there'll be many experiences of peace, pleasure, happiness, joy, but even they are unsatisfactory, even though they're good and they're taking you in the right direction, but because they don't last, they're still unsatisfactory. The only thing that really understands all this is wisdom. We're cultivating the wisdom faculty with all the other factors of the path so that we clearly see the way things are, and then we're not deluded, not caught out by dukkha in whatever form, whether it's the subtle, hidden kind of dukkha, the dukkha of change, or just the ordinary dukkha of pain and suffering to do with the body, with the mind. Insight is where clear knowledge and seeing of these characteristics of our existence and the experiences we have, and not being deluded by them. So then when we're not deluded, we no longer grasp, because why grasp at something that's dukkha? So the arahant who's reached nibbana is not looking for a nice heavenly birth anymore. They're not looking for any kind of worldly pleasure anymore, because they know completely that these things are unsatisfactory in their nature. The mind is no longer grasping, or craving, or attaching to things. So the mind is peaceful. It doesn't mean to say an arahant doesn't have pain. They may still have dukkha that they have to deal with, in the sense they have painful illness, or aches and pains of the body, or hunger, or feeling the cold, or feeling the hot, or somebody doesn't like them and calls them names. Whatever, they may still have that worldly kind of experience, but the mind doesn't suffer with it. The mind is free from dukkha because there's no more clinging to the sense of self. So really, these three kinds of dukkha, they're all part of the same whole, and they're all overcome through cultivating the Eightfold Noble Path to a point where one is no longer deluded, caught into ignorance.
The next question is a two-part question. The first part is, one of the three fetters that a first path attainer or sotapanna has to abandon is sakkaya ditthi. How does a layperson practice in their daily life to achieve this? Well,
carrying on from the last question, our aim is to free ourselves from dukkha and the causes of dukkha. So one has to cultivate this Eightfold Noble Path, whether one is a monastic or a layperson. And one of the hardest things is sustaining that effort, sustaining the faith, the effort, because one of the ways they define the difference between a noble one, and a sotapanna, a stream winner, is a noble one, and an ordinary unenlightened person, is that the noble one, they have certain qualities that are established in the mind and no longer decline. The wisdom, the right view is established, the sila is established. And even though, say, a sotapanna is not yet an arahant, but there are enough of these qualities established that they're no longer going to decline in the practice, go in the wrong direction. They no longer take rebirth in the lower realms. They no longer experience extreme mental states of suffering. They still have some suffering to experience, but it's very little, and they deal with it correctly because they have right view. With the unenlightened person, it's not a guarantee yet. You could still lose your way, get caught into wrong views, mistakenly do things that create very negative karma that comes back to you, brings you a lot of suffering, and could still potentially be reborn in a lower realm. So it's only the noble ones who've developed this certainty in their practice. But a layperson can develop the path and attain stream entry just as a monastic can. Maybe a well-practiced layperson will attain it quicker than a monastic, because how one is practicing internally would depend on the person. And it's the qualities are the most important thing, the qualities that one is developing of the Eightfold Noble Path, sila, samadhi, panya. So the stream winner has right view established, the first part of the path, and then right resolve is established. They understand what is the difference between wholesome and unwholesome thinking. They have established sila, so they follow the 5 precepts. They don't harm others through their speech, their actions. Their faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, their understanding of what is the path, what is not the path, is very well developed, and it doesn't decline. So a layperson may well do that, but they have to dedicate, whether they're a monastic or a layperson, or the person has to dedicate themselves to the practice. Having said that, the monastic life is designed for this practice, so you might say it's more suitable, more conducive. The lay life, there's more risk, more distraction, more opportunity to get embroiled, caught up in the world, because one may have more immediate family duties and may have a job to earn money and surrounded by maybe people who are not practicing and don't have right view. So there's more temptations, more difficulties perhaps, more challenges. But if one is committed to the path, one can practice it. As we know, since the time of the Buddha right up to the present day, lay people have done this and achieved stream entry. They've become sotapannas in the lay life. But you notice those people who do practice that way, their lay life tends to become more monastic in its style. They tend not to be just pursuing wealth for the sake of it. They tend to have more contentment with the basics of life and not just be putting all their time and energy into making money and earning money, because they're putting more of their time and energy into pursuing the path. They may still have a job, but they're not seeking to just multiply their wealth all the time, become famous, powerful, wealthy all the time, because they're putting more energy into the path practice, meditation, and they're keeping the precepts. And often they might live quite a hermetic kind of life, and they're not going to spend so much time socializing, whether it's out in society, on social media, whatever. Their mind is going to be focused on the path more, developing generosity, sila, meditation, and so on. So only they will know whether they've achieved stream entry or not. But from the outside you might be able to see, or someone is definitely practicing in a way that's conducive for the arising of that insight. Sotapatti Maggaphala may arise if someone is practicing in a way that is supportive of that. And it can be done, but it needs a lot of discipline, determination, and a good teacher. Have a good teacher to refer to remind you of what is the path, what is not, to be a good example, to encourage you, to give you advice when you do meet with obstacles. A good teacher is invaluable. And that applies to a monastic as well as a lay person. So it's possible. Put your effort in and you may achieve that. What's that? Is there another part?
So the second part of the question, and this is actually the last question this evening, is when one has achieved stillness in the mind during sitting meditation, where no thought arises, does this mean one has achieved the second jhana?
People love to ask these questions. Well, you can be sitting in a much more modest state of samadhi without a thought arising. Ajahn Chah used to say, the important thing is to develop a state of mind where you're mindfully aware in a continuous fashion. Your mindfulness is not wavering or getting lost. It's there, it's sustained, because when mindfulness is sustained, the mind will become more calm, and the hindrances, which are the obstacles to any development of any state of samadhi, will be at bay. But what level of samadhi you achieve or attain will depend on a number of different factors, and especially when one is new or inexperienced in the practice, it's very easy to jump the gun and assume, I've attained this level or that level. So this is perhaps why Ajahn Chah encouraged us to develop more the attitude of just understanding, is the mind peaceful or not? And of course, one can always deepen that sense of peace, the stillness, through effort in the practice. And there may be, I think most meditators, if they meditate regularly over a period of time, will experience, sometimes the mind is moderately peaceful and then sometimes more deeply peaceful. But exactly what level of peace or samadhi it is, there's always some room for debate there. You can ask someone and they might confirm or not confirm, and that may be true or maybe not. So I'll be a bit wary of always trying to label the level of samadhi. I think the question is probably based around the canonical explanation that the meditator develops first jhana with initial application, sustained application of thought, and then piti, joy, and sukha, happiness. And they attain the second level of jhana by seeing the coarseness of initial and sustained application to the meditation object. So they abandon that and dwell in piti and sukha. But sometimes people, perhaps mistakenly, assume initial and sustained thought means you can still think in a state of samadhi or jhana. Well, it's initial and sustained thought on an object, say the breath. All one's mental energy is directed to the breath. One is applying the mind to the breath and then sustaining it there. It's resonating with the breath, these two qualities that come in the first jhana. It's not like one is sitting there thinking about jhana, thinking back and forth, wandering around, pondering. It's more like one's mental energy is absorbing into one thing, and it's taking up that quality of initial and sustained thought. So it's quite possible when one is focused on the breath to have no thoughts coming in the mind, certainly for periods of time, but one hasn't attained jhana yet. One maybe has just a more modest level of samadhi. According to the commentaries, we call it kanika samadhi, upajara samadhi. But whatever level of samadhi one has attained, at that time, however brief or however long, the hindrances will be at bay. And this is good because the mind gets brighter, more refreshed, sustained sense of peace and stillness, which is a very good basis for contemplation. But the reason one develops samadhi into deeper levels, deeper stages, the levels of jhana, you might say, is because you're getting further and further away from the coarser mind states of the hindrances. So first jhana is somewhat away, second jhana further away, and one is abandoning the more coarser, even the coarser factors of the jhana to go deeper towards complete equanimity, or fourth jhana. So this is why we practice samadhi, but what level one has attained or will attain, I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about that, or pondering or doubting. I'd work more on developing the consistency, continuity of mindfulness on an object, get that skill, and accept whatever level of peace you've got or can attain, good, and then do it again. If you can do it today, then practice doing it again tomorrow, and you'll probably find the depth of your samadhi does deepen. But I wouldn't spend too much time labeling it or thinking in that direction. Just know, is it peaceful or not? Am I mindful or not? Work more on that basis. And when you are peaceful, mindful, there's some samadhi, some stillness there, then contemplate, which is the purpose of it. Contemplate the three characteristics we were talking about earlier. Contemplate the impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, and the lack of self in physical or mental phenomena. Use it like that, and you'll find the development of wisdom will come back to support the development of samadhi as well. How far one gets in one's practice will depend on many factors, how conducive one's situation is, the teacher one has. Sometimes we talk about bharami from past lives as well. There's a number of different factors, one's effort. Then put effort into the practice, just go for it. And if you can attain deep states of samadhi, good, but don't rush to label them in case you make a mistake, and that can actually become an obstacle when you believe you have attained something, and you may have or you may not. And if you haven't, then you may be creating more obstacles for your practice than solutions. So keep practicing, keep observing your mind. Develop the skill of putting attention on an object, sustaining the attention on the object, and if piti and sukha arise, well, if you get more skilled, you can get to the point where you can just put your mind on piti and sukha as an object of mind rather than initial and sustained application of thought. But that tends to be somebody who's quite skilled in the practice, I think, not easy to do. So I think that was the last question. We've covered quite a lot of ground in a short space of time, so there's certainly more things that could be said on these different subjects, but for tonight I'll just say this much and encourage you all to keep practicing. I think you'll find meditation practice will help you, especially at this time of the COVID virus pandemic, because you have more time at home with lockdown, curfew, maybe you're not working. This is a good time to really put effort into meditation practice. Develop your own personal routine every day, meditation, morning, evening, however much time you've got available. Use the time. You can even now you've entered lockdown and say, now I'm going to take the 8 precepts for the next few weeks while we're in lockdown, so as to really channel my energy into the practice, developing mindfulness in daily life, developing samadhi, contemplating the Dhamma, and turn your lockdown into something useful, beneficial for you. You could call it an enforced meditation retreat, 6-week retreat. So I hope it goes well for you, and we'll give you some teachings on another day, but for now I'll just say this much.